Hello, hello! My name is Bisa, and let's talk about remakes. Now, I'm not going to give you a highly superfluous history lesson here. Pokémon is no stranger to remakes, and Game Freak usually pull them off with flying colors, creating some of the most beloved games in the franchise in the process. Whether it's making their breakout titles approachable for a completely new generation of fans in Fire Red and Leaf Green, doubling down on their design philosophy to make an extremely content-dense set of games in Heart Gold and Soul Silver, or even adapting an old game into a completely new era of the franchise with Omega Ruby and Alpha Sapphire. Now, what makes an era of Pokémon to me is more than enough to talk about to make an entire video on, which I will very soon, and technically the Gen 1 and 2 remakes also brought their own originals into a new era by my definition, but I'm getting way ahead of myself here. What's important is that at the point ORAS came out, how we thought about Pokémon games had fundamentally changed from when their originals came out, due to design decisions made in previous games and the general progress the franchise had made because of them. And in this case, I hold a very unpopular opinion as a result. Pokémon as a franchise is extremely reliant on nostalgia. Even its continued success is in many ways to blame on people who grew up on the games now raising a new generation with them. However, this can also cause some issues, often causing fans to romanticize old games, which in my opinion does play at least some role in the modern discourse surrounding the quality of Pokémon games. However, I told you that not because I think it's bad, but because this opinion of mine is exactly one of those. ORAS were without question exceptional Pokémon games, arguably even the best. Many of their additions, like Soaring and Mirage Spots, were very welcome and fit the vibe and themes of Hoenn like a glove. However, for me personally, the biggest character in the original games, which were my first, was the region of Hoenn itself. And through a mix of changes made to adapt the region into this newer era of Pokémon and the technological opportunities that the 3DS offered, ORAS fell completely flat for me as remakes, missing a ton of the charm and feeling that made the Hoenn games so enjoyable to me in the first place. So I foolishly decided that somehow I can do better than people whose job it is to make good games, grabbed a completely legally acquired ROM of Pokémon Emerald, and decided that it was my turn to make my own perfect Gen 3, it's not a hack, it's a remake-demake, Pokémon Corundum. Now that all the explanation for why I'm doing this is out of the way, let's get to actually making this. As you know from the thumbnail and title, we're starting this adventure of creating our own Pokémon remake with recreating all of Hoenn's maps one by one. Possibly the simultaneously easiest and hardest part of the entire process, and we're doing it in roughly the order a player would experience them in while playing the game. The primary goal is to vastly increase map size and freedom of traversal through Hoenn, allowing for tons of new locations, more characterization of each existing location, and expanding the game's environmental storytelling. You'll see what I mean by that by episode 3 at the latest. With all that said and done, welcome to Littleroot Town. A settlement nestled in a series of clearings basking in the vibrant nature of the southwest Hoennian forests. Thanks to its remote location, in spite of its proximity to Petalburg, the surrounding area is a prime location for scholars studying Pokémon from all over the region. The world-renowned Professor Birch even lives here. Despite this, Littleroot is still, and likely will never be much more, but a small settlement. The town that can't be shaded any hue. So, for these first 4 maps, you're actually going to see me copy the map from one ROM to another. I started this project a while ago on a Ruby ROM, and for this sort of internal reboot, I decided to work with an Emerald ROM moving forward, for the sake of including the improvements it made, as well as some additional enhancements we will talk about later down the line, which would have been incompatible with Ruby. Littleroot has the unenviable position of being the possibly blandest starting town in any Pokémon game, period. Something that ORAS actually managed to alleviate, though only very slightly. A square clearing with a couple of houses for our protagonists and the professor's lab. Pallet Town dodged this problem by using its small stretch of shore, fencing, and roads to break up the monotony of its location and make it feel even just a little bit larger than it actually was. And New Barktown to this day feels like one of the most unique starting towns in the entire franchise, in large part due to its choice to break up the 4-quadrant square structure that all other 2D starter towns follow, and also because it has more significance to your adventure, being not only your hometown, but also taking Pallet Town's water feature much further than just a round-trip route, making it the gateway to your post-game adventures in Kanto. So, with all the extra space we have, I decided to take a bit of a cut out of both of these. For now, let's take a page out of New Barktown's book and talk about shape. For this remake, most locations will grow anywhere from 2 to 4 times in size, and to help Littleroot find a bit of its own identity, I went to the full extreme and quadrupled the map's size for this reimagining. Obviously, with this much space, it would be foolish to just make the town a single huge forest clearing in the image of the original, and somewhat giving in to the vibe ORAS ended up feeling like for me. So I've decided to split the town up into a bunch of smaller clearings, each containing their own little thing shaped a bit like the roots of a tree. Even if this does still mostly follow the quadrant structure, the way the player is guided through the clearings helps break things up a lot. The first clearing has Professor Birch's lab, which I feel fits quite well at the entrance of Littleroot. Unlike the original, this way they can even make observations of Route 101 without leaving town. The southwestern clearing, roughly where the lab would have been on the original map, is now an additional house. This is something New Barktown did first, but I personally got the idea from Twin Leaf Town in Diamond and Pearl, which actually had 2 non-protagonists' houses and moved the lab to the next town over. While the interior of this house isn't mapped yet, this will be a simple NPC home, the family of which will talk to you about a few of the new things in this hack. As you may have already spotted by the signposts, the 2 eastern clearings are home to Brendan and May's places. Now is as good a time as any to mention that I did make a few changes to the map after I stopped recording, but we'll go over those when I show them to you in-game. Next, let's take a look back at Pallet Town and talk about texture. Of course, it totally wouldn't fit to pave some sort of road through Littleroot, and I feel like even fencing off a garden would go a bit too far, almost like it's giving more human control than is necessary over the calm southwestern Hoennian wilderness. I did, however, add a small path at the town entrance from Route 101. The only thing I could really do further without disturbing the town's natural feel was to work with the one other floor tile the original map uses: flowers. Instead of being spread across the town in sparse patches, they're now much more concentrated, filling the central clearing. This place is also unique in that it is now the fly spot for Littleroot. Usually for the starter town, using fly will place you on the doorstep of the player's house, but I thought that if we already have such a vibrant spot that both protagonists' homes connect to, it would make for a nice and thematically fitting bit of variety. But that's already pretty much all there is to it. The map is done, so let's go and check it out in-game. And with that, welcome to Littleroot Town. The town that can't be shaded any hue. So the first change will jump you right in the face. It is very dark right now, and that is because one of the main things I did implement for Pokémon Corundum is a day, night, and season system. Don't worry, I am aware of this tile error up here. I'll fix it someday. Now you might have already spotted the one main thing that I have added to this map are these small trees interspersed with the large ones here and there. I might even add more of them because some parts, like over here, they do look very one note, kind of boring, even though I have already broken up the very square-like structure that most Pokemon maps have, or like the very rigid structure. One other thing you'll notice is that these flowers aren't animated like they're supposed to. You might also notice that the colors might be very bright and a bit washed out. That's a side effect of me not having fully implemented the season system yet. I've changed the color palette, but the animations are broken. This is the spring tile set. No idea why it's happening.
while I'm recording this in October. If anything, it should be the fall tile set right now, which is a lot like Lava Ridge. Very, very vibrant browns and dark red colors. And you can also see down here the water feature is also not moving and doesn't go anywhere. That's because, again, for one, no tile animations, because season system, very broken right now. And it just doesn't go anywhere yet. There's no map down there, which there will be in the future, but new maps, entirely new maps, are going to be something that I'll be adding, like, at the very end, after I've redone all the major overworld maps that are already in the game. But what I did do, at least to an extent, was this little family's house that I added down here, which I mentioned not having finished yet when I recorded the time-lapse. Now it's done. Not quite. I haven't fixed the collision data from the template map I used for this, so I can't... It's like the table is still over here. But these two are going to be talking to you about the weather. So this is another small family that moved here, just like us. They moved from Kanto, we moved from Johto, and the little girl she's super like enthusiastic and pumped about how warm it is here compared to Kanto. While her mother's like, man, she's been so obsessed with the weather since we moved here. Maybe I should take her to Lily Cove someday, and both of these two are going to have different dialogue based on what the current season is. So for example, maybe, you know, she should take her to Wall Arbor someday, or Verdant Turf for spring, something like that, right? These are all things I'm going to be figuring out as I go. But I think that is about as good of an overview as I can give right now. There's not a lot to show here in Littleroot. However, I can give you a quick sneak peek at what you'll be seeing next week, which is Route 101, which at this point I have already implemented and recorded the time-lapse for. So there you go. Quick little look at Route 101 for next week, but as I said, that will be for next week. So if you've enjoyed this little ROM hacking adventure so far, I think I'll be doing these in a weekly basis wherever I can, in between other Pokemon related videos, because I don't just want to do ROM hacking. I want to talk about all sorts of stuff, from really basic things like what my favorite Pokemon are, you know, to what I mentioned earlier, the different eras of Pokemon, how I classify the time of Pokemon beyond just generations. But that's all for then. If you're interested in all that stuff, or just more ROM hacking dev diaries like this one, be sure to subscribe. If you've enjoyed the video, I'd love a like, helps a lot. Usual call to action stuff at the end of this video. Thank you all so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed. My name's been Bisa, and have a good one.